Hello again, and welcome to BSF Recovery Team. Today we're going to take a look at that Thomas compressor and see why it wasn't pumping enough air in the Hummer. Typically what happens is the stainless steel flapper valves or reed valves crack and break. So, shall we open her up and take a look? The compressor we're using was originally designed for the air suspension on the rear of an H2. It's capable of 100 psi and is a sealed unit. But when it was in the H2, it wasn't able to pump up enough air to keep the rear end up anymore. So we got to pull the head off and see what was wrong. In the head of the compressor, there's a cover, an intermediate plate, and two stainless steel flapper valves, one on the intake, one on the exhaust. All the parts are intact, but there's a whole lot of corrosion that we need to take care of. That must have been the problem, why it wasn't pumping up to full pressure. Because the recovery team operates on a small budget, we decided to clean everything up rather than spend the money and buy a rebuild kit. The only gasket is between the top valve and the cover, and that's where most of the corrosion was. So we had to get a little more aggressive with cleaning up those parts. Even with all the parts clean, we still had a little bit of pitting in both the aluminum cover and intermediate plate. So we decided to seal everything up with a microfilm of this gasket maker from GM. We had to make sure that we had a good seal between the intake and the exhaust side, as well as sealing all the way around the outside. As we were assembling the plates, we had to make sure that we put things together properly. So we had a valve that works as the intake and a valve that works as the exhaust. Then we had to make sure that the cover was going to seal good. A little never seize on the bolts that go into the aluminum. Tighten everything down properly. And clean off any excess gasket material. Now we're ready to reassemble all the fittings. We got a nice little air filter here that'll go on the intake side. And now all the fittings for the exhaust side. Can't forget a safety or pop-off valve. And finally, our stainless steel line to the air tank. Now we can finally mount our compressor underneath the winch on the deck of the wrecker. And tighten up the bolts through the bushings on that nice mounting plate that came with it. And there's our compressor in its new home, tucked underneath the winch. And we can finally attach our line to our air tank. Well, now that we got the compressor fixed and pumping air and all the plumbing done, the last thing is the wiring or the electrical. But as usual, things don't quite work the way you plan them. I thought I could use the pressure switch to run the circuit for the compressor, but unfortunately there's too much of a voltage drop to the contacts in the pressure switch and not enough left over to run the compressor so it'll pump up to full pressure. So what we're going to have to do is use the pressure switch to drive a solenoid to open and close the circuit for the compressor. So tune in next week and we'll show you how we're going to do that. Thanks for watching. BSF Recovery Team.